Hello, GM family. My name is Robert Johnson. I'm of counsel in the Chicago office, part of the cannabis practice and the corporate practice. And I have the honor and privilege to be the host of today's episode of In My Shoes in honor of Black History Month. And I'm just excited about the amazing lawyers that you're about to hear from who are fairly new to the GM family. We have Kendall Mentor, who is a part of our entertainment practice. I'll have him introduce himself shortly. And then Ahmand Johnson, who is also part of our entertainment practice. If you guys could just quickly give a brief introduction, and then we'll jump right into today's topic.
Sure, I guess in no particular order. Thank you, Robert, and hello, Ahmand. Always good to see you guys. So my name is Kendall Mentor, as Robert had mentioned. I'm of counsel to Greenspoon. I am in the Atlanta office. I specialize in entertainment, media, intellectual property, licensing, merchandising, in the film, television, theater, motion picture, pretty much all things and anything that smacks of entertainment. As we talked about offline, I hate litigation, so I'm strictly transactional. Anytime it's a litigation matter, I refer to our litigation team, let them do their gladiator thing, because there's something that I don't want to do with service of a document on a Thursday night saying you got a deposition on a Friday. And other than that, I've been practicing. I might be the OG in the room because I've been practicing since 1970. Is it 70? 1970, I think.
Wow.
No, 1976. I'm at that OG. So I've been practicing since 76. And as we kind of have some conversation about our path, I can get into what that journey has been, the good, the bad, the indifferent, the highs, and fortunately, not too many lows.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you. Ahmand?
All right. Thank you. Ahmand Johnson. I'm a partner in the Miami office of Greenspoon, Marder. I joined the firm last year in April. My practice spans both transactional and litigation, mostly transactional though. On the transactional side, both entertainment and sports. With entertainment, mostly music, although I've gotten into film and television a bit of late. And then on the sports side, mostly football, both with college athletes relative to NIL and other similar matters. And then on the professional end, with NFL players handling their contract negotiations as well as their ancillary legal work. I've been practicing since 2006. And I'm happy to be here both at the firm and happy to join you all today to have this conversation.
Great. Well, thanks, gentlemen. So today, our guest and I will be sharing just a few examples, that we've experienced personally, some of the ongoing challenges that we face as Black men in general in our daily lives, and then in particular in the legal profession. But before I begin, I'd like to just remind everyone that a lot of the topics that we cover here on In My Shoes can be sensitive in nature, and they may have some triggering impact on folks. But what we're expressing are our realities and the things that we've experienced. So the hope is that it will be enlightening and help folks just understand another perspective that of a group that is perhaps not one that you have been in their shoes. So hopefully that this will be illuminating, as I said, and provide some insight and some rich dialogue. So with that in mind, one of the things that I want to throw out is just, it's kind of a broad question, but what are some of the unique challenges that you have experienced as a Black man in America, and particularly a Black attorney? And I'll throw it. We go in the same order, I guess. We'll start with Kendall in terms of just, give us some perspective and some insight on that.
Well, I'll take you slingshot back to when I first graduated from Cornell University Law School. My first job was a grateful position, thanks to relationships. And I'll just be honest, thanks to nepotism. My dad was a senior vice president at a large national corporation called Fairchild Industries. He was in charge of the Black Hawk program, so he had a lot of juice. And he says, hey, my son is graduating from school. And I interviewed, and that was my first offer. I accepted it right away, and that was my first job. And I went from Ithaca down to Washington, D.C., where I stayed for a couple of years. After a couple of years there and hanging out in the studio at night with Chuck Brown and the Soul Searchers and the go-go scene and all of that kind of stuff, I decided I really wanted to practice entertainment law, specializing in music. I had been a disc jockey on radio while I was at Cornell. I was a concert promoter because I had to pay for my car note. So I was already tangentially in the music industry. But the interesting thing and a dynamic that I'm sure a lot of people can be sensitive to and relate to is that when I decided I wanted to move from the general counsel, I was associate general counsel in a major multinational firm, into New York City, into a private entertainment firm, I sent out around 20 resumes. And, you know, it's a numbers game. We all know that when you're job seeking. But I thought the credentials were pretty strong given the background that I had. And out of the 20, it narrowed it down to maybe 5 meaningful conversations. And what I found out at the end of those conversations and that search was essentially, while the credentials were good, the entertainment law firms that I reached out to, a couple were larger firms, but the other 3 that really zeroed in specialized in, and they were leaders in the New York entertainment law market in that space. And the comments I got was, hey, you got great credentials. You know, we got a lot of Black and African-American clients. We could really use someone like you. But they were saying that because it was politically correct, because none of those conversations wound up being an offer for employment as an associate at their firm. The flip side of that is, because of my Cornell affiliation, resumes that I sent out went to a large Park Avenue firm called Burns Jackson Miller Summit in Jacoby. And I found out after I was interviewing with the hiring partner that the reason that I got the interview was because of the Cornell connection. And I sent it to the founder of the firm, Arnold Burns, who was a former Solicitor General in the Nixon administration. And he gave it to Guy Fairstein, the hiring partner, say, hey, this kid looks like he's got some potential, interview him. Long and the short of it is I got interviewed, I got hired. That was my first real position in private practice on Park Avenue. But it was all because of the relationships from the university. And then fast forward, you know, once I started practicing, I always ran up against the bar of, hey, well, you know, you got some skills, but you're not in that inner circle. And that inner circle wasn't really defined. We know what the inner circle is in the entertainment industry, and it didn't necessarily look like us, smell like us, move like us, and it didn't have the collective network that we had. So there would be quite a number of times where potential clients, you know, I like your demeanor, I like your expertise, but I got to go with somebody who's really connected on the inside. Even though the skill set, the experience level might have been similar, I got to connect with somebody on it. If you're on the inside track with these folks that are making the decisions, none of whom look like us, spending the budgets, none of whom look like us. So there was always that bar of, you got to be 5 times better. You got to be much more connected. And you got to kind of at least have some kind of tentacles to at least the periphery of that inside circle in order to be able to progress a private practice career. And over the years, I was blessed and fortunate. I kind of penetrated that inside circle, and I mastered the art of relationship development, building, and maintenance. And I attribute most of my progress in my career to the maintenance and development of those relationships.
Excellent. Ahmand, you know, you want to take a swipe at that question, same question?
Sure. I had a similar experience to Kendall relative to the alumni connections kind of leading to my first legal job. So when I went to undergrad at Brown University, I played football and ran track there, developed some very meaningful relationships across racial lines, which ended up ultimately being beneficial. But then coming out of law school at UCLA, at the time when I moved to South Florida, UCLA, I believe, was the number 11 ranked school in the nation. And so as I'm considering employment prospects, I'm going through the online rosters of each of the big firms in South Florida, and I'm noticing, wow, as far as credentials go, my credentials, should put me head and shoulders above, other applicants because, clearly there's not a lot of folks on their roster that have these types of credentials. So, I'm thinking, well, there's not a higher ranked law school within several states in any direction. So, I should go in and put in my resume and application, and I should be able to eeny, meeny, miny, mo from a bunch of different offers. But what ended up happening is I got the thank you, we'll keep your information on file letter from every single firm. But then I got smart and I did it the old-fashioned way, right? And recognizing the fact that, I didn't go to an Ivy League school because the books are any different than, any other school, but it's because of the folks that are sitting next to you and in front of you that you can develop those relationships with. I was fortunate to have developed a strong relationship with a young man who was younger than me, who was on the basketball team and had broken the record broken the scoring record for the basketball team. So he was a pretty notable alum, and he had carried some relationships both in the finance world and the legal world. But through him, I was able to meet the managing partner for a large law firm down here, Schutz and Bowen. And then I also went on the alumni database, and I found 5 partners who looked as if they had the ability to pull the levers necessary to, place me in the firm. Out of those 5, including the gentleman from Schutz and Bowen, there were 2 others in addition to him that responded. I asked them if I could take them to lunch, dinner, or treat them to a coffee so that I can get any advice, information, or referrals that they might be able to offer. And I walked away from each of those 3 encounters with offers. And each of them said something to the effect of, wow, you have such an impressive resume and you're so impressive personally. There's no way we could possibly miss out on a talent like you. And the whole time I'm thinking, well, you need to have a talk with your recruiting director because they clearly thought otherwise. I did unfortunately spend a lot of time pondering exactly what the reason was for my initial rejection and what was the discrepancy between the folks that I made an impression on by having a face-to-face encounter and the folks that were reviewing my resume. And I couldn't help but think that my name, which is a distinctly Black name, I don't think that there are many people walking around that are non-melanated named Ahmand Rashad Johnson, right? So it was pretty clear to me that it was my surmise at that time that had a lot to do with it. But what I had to do at that point is put that out of my mind and focus on the task at hand, which was to try to maximize whatever opportunities I garnered. And I also had to take note of the fact that, in the same ways that the system that would potentially see my name and disqualify me on that basis was hindering me. I also had access to, a network that functioned pretty much on those same principles that was able to aid me. So at the end of the day, you have to try to figure out and focus on what resources you do have and try to leverage those resources as best you can. And, the fact that there are going to be some additional hurdles or, some extra work that's going to need to be done is not foreign to us. So, on the professional level, I've never found it terribly helpful to dwell on that, or at least giving it more weight than, a result-oriented type thought process. So one of the challenges for me has been to kind of put all of the the adversity that might come as a result of being a Black man out of my mind, at least while I'm trying to execute the task at hand. And there's always time where you can get around like-minded folks and grouse about this or that, but at the end of the day, the world only cares about, in the professional world, they only care about did you or did you not execute, right? And no one's going to take the time to get to the why. The what is really all that matters in many of these cases. So, because of that, I've always tried to make myself a resource for other folks coming up, because not everyone has that Ivy League network. So what I try to do is lend that network to anyone that I can be a mentor or a resource to. And I think that that's going to be very important in us kind of, changing the tide, which is slowly changing, because I can say that I've benefited, particularly in the entertainment space, from some of the experience that folks like Kendall, who's a trailblazer in the entertainment industry. I don't think that he played that up enough. He's being very humble in his introduction, but folks like Kendall definitely paved the way for me to be able to get involved in entertainment. But specifically in the entertainment space, you find, as Kendall said, that there's a saying amongst folks that the white man's ice is colder, right? When we know that all ice freezes at the same temperature. But there's a perception that irrespective of, the educational pedigree or the actual skill set, folks are going to assume certain things about you, even our own people, unfortunately. And what I found is that, particularly in non-entertainment spaces, I have to be the one that looks the part, right, before I ever even open my mouth. It's a little bit less stringent in the entertainment space, just because you're dealing with creatives, but it's still, you still have to present yourself differently than other folks. You can't afford to be as casual in your speech, in your presentation, as other folks, because particularly in entertainment, there's already a notion that there's a certain ethnic group that somehow has had like superior legal skill bestowed upon them just by virtue of ethnicity or race or whatever. And we don't tend to be situated at the top of that analysis. So ultimately, it's just something that you have to deal with, and understanding that, and being result oriented, I think is something that was helpful to me in being able to achieve some modicum of success, and while enduring those issues.
As I listen to the two of you, the thought that comes to my mind is referred to often as the Black man's burden, and the mental gymnastics that you often have to go through in order to ascertain am the treatment I'm receiving or the opportunities that I'm being presented or denied have a function of racism or are tied to my race, or is it something else? And it's a calculus that we have to do with just about every interaction and decision and situation that we encounter. And I'll kind of briefly give my story as well. So I graduated in 93. I started practicing in 93 from University of Illinois. And while I was on campus there, Illinois being a public school, the law firms would come and, they would have criteria as to whether or not you could interview with the different law firms. And I was of the opinion that if they're going to come to a public university, I'm going to interview, and they're going to interview me regardless. I don't care what their requirements are, which was an unpopular stance to take, to say the least, back then. But nevertheless, I did that because I've always been sort of fight the power type brother. And I ended up getting an interview, which probably was much to the chagrin of a lot of people, with this law firm of litigation firm in Chicago called Johnson & Bill, ironically. And the guy, one of the recruiters, apparently I impressed him enough that he forwarded my resume on to the rest of the hiring partners, and I got an interview with them and ultimately got a job there. and was the only African-American attorney in the entire firm of, I don't know, probably 200 lawyers. And so that was an experience. That was my introduction. Law school was a whole nother experience, but then going to in the private practice was a whole nother ordeal. And one of the things that I think Kendall talked about was having, connections, trying to get clients as a young lawyer, trying to navigate a law firm, being the only brother in the firm was tough to say the least. And I'm first generation everything. So I didn't have, any other people that I could turn to for, advice. Everybody who I knew that was a Black lawyer was a first generation Black lawyer as well. So I lasted there probably about 5 years, I think, or so before I just had enough. And then I ended up going to a small, what at the time was one of the top Black law firms in the country, a small commercial litigation boutique. And I ended up going there, and McDonald's became a client of mine. They were more, they didn't really have traditional litigators there. They were more specialized in some commercial litigation. I could do a little bit of everything given my background. And so McDonald's ended up becoming a client of mine. Long story short, they liked the work that I did for them and ended up asking me to come in-house for them, which I was in-house for about 15 years. And that was a whole nother unique experience working for probably one of the most recognized brands in the country, and having a significant role there. And I often remember how many times white lawyers would come to pitch me for business, and will come to pitch for business, but not realize that I was the person that was given the business. Because I would usually come in, after my team, which was all white, would kind of set up the meeting, and I would come in kind of inconspicuously after the meeting had started, and they're trying to pitch to these folks. And then as soon as I come into the meeting, they begin to realize that everybody in the meeting is deferring to me, and they were not prepared for that. Because this was back in the day before you could just Google somebody, you had, or LinkedIn and all of that. So they had no idea who I was. And then I would always ask the question about the diversity in their firm. And it would just be amazing to see all of these, seasoned white litigators who would stumble over themselves and be perplexed to answer a very simple question about how diverse is your firm. And they would pull out, well, Jesus works in the mailroom, or Taekwon makes deliveries, but they were not referencing any attorneys or anybody that had any professional skill level. And it would usually end up being a very short meeting once I got there. And I ended up creating the most diverse network of outside counsel probably in the history of McDonald's, and made a lot of diverse lawyers very, 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 very wealthy by giving them work. And then I ended up leaving the business, the legal side, and going over to the business side, and became because I call myself a lawpreneur. I am as much of an entrepreneur as I am a lawyer, and went over to the business. I actually created a couple of businesses while I was in McDonald's, one for McDonald's and then one for myself. And then I ended up going to the business side and becoming the franchise relations officer and the company liaison to all the Black McDonald's owner operators in the system, and just really fell in love, became probably the country's foremost expert on minority franchising, and helping minority and women entrepreneurs grow and scale their businesses. And then left there to pursue this management consulting firm that I created. Became the chief diversity officer for and created the largest minority and woman-owned law firm in the country, because I have a deep and abiding passion about what our profession has an obligation to do as it relates to diversity. It's amazing to me that as lawyers, we're problem solvers, but by definition, that's what people come to lawyers for, to solve a problem. Nobody calls a lawyer just to have a chat. So, but yet and still, we cannot solve this problem of diversity in our profession. I've had these same conversations for 30 years about the same things that we're talking about as Black men in the profession have been talked about for way longer than that. And as Ahmand said, they're getting better, but getting is a very gradual and incremental get. So that's my story. And I want to try to, because I don't know how much time we have here, but I want to talk about, switch gears a little bit. And what advice do you have for younger, because we're all kind of OGs in some respect, although much respect to Kendall, he's the OG. But what advice do you have for other Black men in general and Black lawyers in particular, as we try to navigate this thing called the United States, this thing called life, and this thing called the legal profession?
Well, on the lawyer side, specifically as it relates to entertainment and sports lawyers, I'm proudly one of the co-founders of an organization that we set up in 1980 called the Black Entertainment and Sports Lawyers Association, affectionately known as BESLA, which I'm proud because I've said BESLA has now had a lot of babies and grandbabies because it's generational, because it's been around so long. And our whole purpose for forming was to give Black attorneys, male, female, and otherwise, and folks of color, an opportunity to network and to be able to share information, resources, contracts, referrals, and it worked. We started off with an annual conference, which we had once a year, then it mushroomed into the annual plus additional conferences during the year in different cities. And the long and the short of it is now, because I just came back from the most recent BESLA convention in Mexico back in November, is we have several hundred members that are active. But the joy for me is we probably have high-level representation in the C-suites of practically every single entertainment and sports franchise in the United States. So that immediately gives you access, because you send an email, pick up the phone, say, hey, I'm a BESLA member. You're going to get a positive response from folks because they know the value of the organization, but more importantly, the value of giving back, as you were just talking about, Robert, bringing folks forward to be able to share information, share opportunities, which otherwise would be not even on the radar screen. So my recommendation is for anyone who's truly interested in entertainment, sports, and media, join BESLA, do the research, become an active member, participate, get your CLE credits, because you can get your CLE credits for an entire year just from coming to the annual conference, and then work the network. It's all about building, maturing, and nurturing relationships, because that's been the path that's taken me from just coming out of law school to where I am now, working relationships, developing them across all sectors of the business. And I highly encourage folks to step up and be proactive and not just wait for something to drop in your lap, because that's what you call a miracle.
Excellent. Ahmand?
Well, thank you. I'm one of the folks that can say that I'm a beneficiary of Kendall's work with founding BESLA. That was actually my first real foray into entertainment and sports law. I had always thought that I wanted to do it, but that kind of made it real and gave me a sense of the vast universe of professionals, elite professionals that we had, that I could make a resource. Which leads me to the most important thing that I would try to impart on young lawyers or prospective lawyers is, as Kendall said, build your network. Ultimately, relationships are the way that you generate business, and once you hone your skills to a certain point, that's really the primary thing that the legal practice is about, right? Because you have to actually have cases to work in order to continue to do this work. So particularly if you're on your own, because then you don't have the benefit of the resources of a firm to feed you work. But I would definitely say, number one, focus on building your network. Well, actually, number one, focus on honing your skill set, right? Particularly in writing and speaking, because those are the two areas that they will seek to, exploit, first. So at the point that you have superior writing, at the point that you present well, it's a lot more difficult to deny you those opportunities. And then that will lead to being able to demonstrate value to the folks in your network, which will ultimately lead to business generation. The other thing that I would say is try to focus on the what and not the why, because you will drive yourself crazy, right? Just accept whatever it is at face value until you execute whatever objective there is. And then, in the post-mortem stage, you can opine on, why this or that may have happened or not have happened. But ultimately, we need to be very result-oriented and execute, because again, at the point that you execute and you have results, results rule over everything else, right? Perception is going to be neutralized by results. And one thing I want to go back to is in building your network, do not restrict that to folks that you are comfortable with or folks that are in your circle, right? Because what I found, surprisingly, there were some folks that did not look like me that I would have never thought were allies, that were very instrumental in both providing opportunities for me and helping to nurture me as a professional. And even some folks that didn't look like me and had political views that were 180 degrees diametrically opposed to mine, and that I might think are hostile to my existence, right? But you'd be surprised the ways in which you can impact folks on a personal level, find some common ground, and mine certain relationships that were, you would not anticipate would be fruitful for opportunities and resources. So, don't restrict yourself in your networking. Don't allow a defeatist mindset or perspective to take hold. We know what the challenges are. That doesn't mean that we diminish the reality of those challenges, but it simply means at the end of the day, you're either going to do it or you're not. And if you're going to do it, you have to be result oriented, focus on the what, not the why, build your network and demonstrate value to your network. And I think that will lead to a successful career.
Excellent. I mean, what I would add to that is that, I often try to quote Charles Hamilton, and he said that lawyers are either a social engineer or a social parasite. And you should strive to be the former rather than the latter. And particularly as Black men, I think we have an obligation because so much has been sacrificed for us to occupy the seats that we occupy, that we have to be cognizant of that and make it our duty to reach back and to engage in trying to create a better society, particularly for our community. And that if you do that, what has been my experience is that business will come because you are seen as a leader. And lawyers, again, are problem solvers. And our first obligation is to try to address the problems that exist in our community. And there's ample. So there's no shortage of work to do that we're uniquely qualified to do because of our training, because of the way we think about problems, the way we can advocate, just the stature that we are afforded by virtue of being a lawyer in our community. I mean, I don't care. Everybody since the time I graduated from law school has adopted me as their lawyer, regardless of whether or not I even know the type of issue that they're trying to address, but just the fact that they have access to my way of thinking or perspective or my training, they see value in that. So we have to expand on that and look to create opportunities to help folks that look like us. And believe, and I truly believe that we still can because I spent a lot of time chasing white clients when I was in my early career, and now they chase me. But it wasn't because I was chasing them, it's because I stopped chasing them and I just started doing the work that resonated with me and my community. And they saw that, and they sought me out, as well as the folks in my community that sought me out. So it goes back to your comment, Ahmand, to me, that the white man's ice is colder. The black man ice is colder and is tastier, and it reflects the sun in a way that resonates with me. So I've put that ice in my Kool-Aid, and it's done well by me. And I encourage other younger brothers to look at black ice, because it can do the same thing that the white ice can do. And it will yield you fantastic results. So, any closing comments?
That ice has a lot of flavor, right?
Right. Any quick closing comments? Because again, I don't know how much time we have, but any quick closing comments that you want to share?
I would just make it pretty succinct to say, listening to all the comments that we've shared individually and collectively, at the end of the day, is stay on top of your skill set, take nothing for granted, be proactive, and network your ass off.
Well said by the OG.
I would second everything that Kendall said, and the one other thing I would add is, for us, we have to remember that you are presenting yourself as a lawyer 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, right? When you go out to the grocery store, when you go to the gym, when I go to my son's practices, I find that I put some thought into what I'm going to have on, just in case I run into someone who, might present an opportunity to generate some business. I want to be able to create a certain impression when I have that conversation with them. So, be ready at all times to present as a lawyer, both physically and otherwise. And as Kendall said, hone your skill set and build your network.
Yeah, thank you, gentlemen. I'll just add two African proverbs. One is, if you want to go far, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And that speaks to the unity that we need as a collective, and as Black men in particular. And then the other one is the spirit of Ubuntu, which is I am because we are. And that, again, speaks to unity and collective coming together to try to support each other. And so it is an honor to have this time with both of you. I take my hat off to you. I salute you and I thank you. And with that, we'll close. And GM family, hopefully this was enlightening and provided you with some insight. And if nothing else, a perspective of two extraordinary Black lawyers that are part of the GM family.
Three.
Thank you. I'll receive that.
Thank you for hosting, Robert. Thank you, Kendall.
Appreciate it. Take care, everybody.